Hi, and welcome to another episode of Real Legal Talk. I'm Jen, and this is Joette of KEILY, Mira Law, and we're here to talk to you about the 4 common pitfalls that we see in real estate contracts. So that's not to say they're the only pitfalls, but these are the 4 most common that we see come up that we end up having to explain to our buyers and sometimes our agents.
Time is of the essence. It means that certain dates have to be met by that date. That is the drop dead date. And we typically see it in relation to closing dates, though it can be applied to other dates. But when it comes to closing, if there is no time is of the essence language in a contract, then the parties are not obligated to close on that specific day. They can close around that date or within a reasonable amount of time within that date. So again, sometimes we get buyers and sellers who say, I took off work on this day. I want to be compensated because we're not closing out that day. Or I hired movers and I paid them already and it's going to cost me money to change the date. Or perhaps they've hired babysitters or they have family coming into town to help them move. Just because there's a date in the contract, it does not mean that you have to close on that date without time is of the essence.
Yeah, and obviously I've bought and sold a house before. You have too. We'd all love to be able to say, the date is the date, but unfortunately it's just not the way it works unless time is of the essence is in the contract. So as Joette said, it's not standard language in Greater Hartford. It is in other counties, but sometimes we do see it slipped in there on a contract if a seller needs to be out by a certain time and they try to reinforce those dates. So it's not unheard of, but it's not standard. Issue number 2 is missing dates that are on the contract without extensions. That's a huge issue and we see it all the time. I see quite regularly people thinking that dates, because they're not, unless time is of the essence, fixed in stone, that extensions are really not necessary, but not having extensions puts a buyer's deposit money at risk. So if you're not going to be making the mortgage contingency date, or if you're going to have exceptions on the mortgage commitment that aren't allowed or wouldn't preserve a deposit, you need to request an extension for those in order to protect those deposit monies.
The third issue that we see is not delivering deposits on time. Now, in Greater Hartford County, the contract states that all deposits need to be delivered within 3 days of the date that they are due, the date that was stated in the contract. So if a deposit is supposed to be delivered on a certain day and it hasn't been delivered within 3 days of that date, then the buyer is in breach because of that. And that would give the seller the right to unilaterally terminate the contract.
And the important thing to consider is that with respect to the second deposit, usually there's a first and second deposit with contracts. The second deposit, if it's not paid within 3 days of the date that's within the contract, then it's considered a breach. But the first deposit, if the first deposit isn't paid at the time the contract is signed, there are 3 days following that date that a buyer has to physically hand in the check. If the check is not handed in within that 3-day period, there's no contract. So the seller, can entertain other offers during that time and can actually commit after that 3-day period to another buyer if the funds aren't in hand. So that's a very important thing to remember.
Definitely. So as a buyer, you want to make sure that you hand in your deposits on time so that we can make sure that the contract stays valid and that you as a buyer have the right to continue to purchase the property because you made the deposits and made the contract valid.
Correct. And the fourth issue or pitfall that we see pretty regularly is what we call either buyer's remorse or seller's remorse. And we actually have this as a main topic on another video relating to specific performance. So check out that video with respect to a seller's remorse situation and the types of damages that a seller can face. But what we see sometimes are buyers and sellers deciding at the end of the day, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't feel like selling, or I feel guilty about selling, or I don't like this house that much anymore, or I saw another one and it's cheaper and I want to do that.
I want that one instead.
Right. So we see that happen, not all the time, but enough. And people tend to be surprised that they're going to be on the hook for losing money. Right. So this is a very common pitfall that we want to tell everyone about, because it is going to cost money. Not only is it going to, so if you're a buyer who's decided I don't want to proceed with this and you're past all your contingency dates, that deposit money is on the hook. you can really anticipate that you're going to have a fight on your hands over that deposit money. If you're a buyer and you decide that you want to terminate pre-contingencies, you're going to have to go through some expenses
Right, to get out of the contract.
to get out of the contract. You're going to have your inspection done. You're going to have to, if you've already had your inspection, apply for a mortgage and hope that you can provide a denial letter. I mean, there's a lot of hoops to jump through. So when you commit to a contract, it really is important that you want to proceed with that contract.
And these are all certainly tricky situations. So if you find yourself in one of these situations where you're having remorse, either as a buyer or seller, call us as attorneys so that we can advise you as to what the next steps are so that we can best protect your position in that situation.
Yeah, don't wait. Don't act first and then seek help later, because a lot of times once you've already terminated, for example, we can't go back and help or preserve things like we could have in the beginning if you had decided or said, I made a mistake, how do we fix this? So these are just 4 of the common things that we've seen come up as of late. And
there's
as always, there's a lot more. And as always, we're here as a resource. So please check out our other videos and call us with questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.